we are very happy that we have this lecture, and where we have these two important so journalists with us today. Kaushik Dasgupta is a feature editor at Down to Earth, and he has kindly agreed to serve as chair during Richard's lecture. And welcome, Richard and Kaushik. Kaushik, very modestly, he would say that he's a student of history, and he would write about his history of food and things. But if you go to the website of Down to Earth, you will see the kind of engagement that he has in various issues. Like, I would encourage all of you to go to this website and read Richard and Kaushik and many others at Down to Earth. And Kaushik has been kind of looking at this he says this is deep engagement. He's been looking at how history, politics and culture has shaped the environment and vice versa, like how these things are mutually shaping each other. So I hand over the mic to Kaushik. Over to you.
Thank you. It's a great pleasure to introduce Richard, but I must confess that it's not a very easy task. How do you introduce somebody who's been a mentor, a friend, a fellow traveler, someone whose presence you've taken for granted for long? So what I'll do is I'll start by relating an anecdote. This happened, I think, about 8 to 10 years ago. What Richard did was he tried to enroll himself in a course on environmental studies. And when he did that, to his surprise, he found out that the reading list had a lot of articles which he had written. The surprise was, I think, entirely uncalled for. It was modesty that we've come to associate Richard with. Whoever had framed that reading list was actually doing a very good job in putting those articles in the list. This is because Richard belongs to a school of journalists, a generation of journalists who were schooled by the redoubtable Anil Agarwal. They were schooled to write about the environment when writing about environment was not such a fashionable pursuit. This was not an idyllic environment. It was not about beautiful forests and magnificent animals. They were there, of course, but they were there as part of. They were there as indispensable elements in people's life. Richard's work tells us about how the environment is critical to understanding both poverty and prosperity in large parts of India. And if you look at it, it's a fascinating jigsaw with each element in ecology shaping another, and how they go on to shape an economy, and how that economy then interacts with the national economy. This was times when environment was not fashionable. Environment is mainstream now. But what has happened now is the jigsaw has gotten a little more complicated. What is ostensibly local stories are not actually local. They are interacting with, they are getting shaped by, as well as shaping struggles, conflicts at at a national, at a global scale. Richard will talk more about that, and I hand you over to Richard.
Thank you, Kaushik. Good evening, everybody. And great Kaushik, I think we have been working together for more than a decade. Hardly few inches away from each other. And you never told me all this. So good to know. And again, to begin with, I have a few disclaimers to make. This is not a lecture per se, I think. If you look at the list, the earlier speakers and the beyond, I think, those are of very high value, people who come with lots of expertise and articulation. And if you call myself giving a lecture, I think that's also too big expectations. So this is one disclaimer, it's not a lecture per se. And the second disclaimer I want to make is that I think I always treat myself as a courier boy. And I hope that the journalists also should treat themselves as a courier boy. We don't have much bigger role than a courier boy. You go to places, get stories, messages and perspective and just deliver it. Sometimes it's very impersonal, but yes, we do that. And we deal with information. And the third one, as a person, I belong to an era, what you can call it the nationalized era of India. My telephone, school, health, everything was, including the ration and food grains, everything was nationalized. I still remember going to a PDS shop and getting my food grains. So it is actually an era of India where India was united, one entity, one way, if you call it that way. But India was not unique, as we officially call now. Every Indian is a unique identity, and it was not that era. Now coming back to the magazine. Whatever I say here and put in front of you, it's basically the experience of the magazine. The magazine started in 1992, coinciding with India opening its economy. The great liberalization process started. And if you go to the first issue of Down to Earth, there was a debate. 3 pages, 4 pages, if you remember, debate. And many of these people now, one of them you can identify with is Jairam Ramesh. He is the Rural Development Minister now. That point of time he was officer on special duty to Planning Commission. Not that a very glorified position, but anyway, he was there and many other scientists and all that. The debate was whether economic liberalization will have any impact on environment or not. And that's where from we actually start this presentation. 20 years we have survived. And we are completely liberalized. We have a new generation, I think most of you belong to that generation. 91 or 90s, the early 90s. What happened exactly? Liberalization, did it have any impact on the environment? What kind of development, actually different development we achieved, what did not achieve? This magazine actually, I think it's very unlikely that way some people from down to earth making or giving a lecture or making a presentation. As Kaushik pointed out, it was not very fashionable that point of time, but we did. And because the editor was Anil Agrawal, he was like, he used to drive us mad. So This magazine very silently, and as such its location is also out of Delhi almost, it's the extreme south. And that office, all have reporters like me who are going to villages and doing stories and coming with filing stories that not sure about what the stories mean, whether we reported something great, but we are working on. After 20 years, I must say that this is a chronicle which was never foretold. We still go back to the villages. I may be revisiting the same village for 5th time, 6th time. The geography remains the same for our reporting, but there are changes. Wherever we enter a village now, there are many contests. It was not there 20 years ago, or say 97, it means at least 15 years ago. So my presentation is basically just to take you, not in a lecture format, but to give you a chronicle which we all should be aware of. And I always remember why we need to re-emphasize that journalist or the media, which plays a very critical role in information dissemination, should be talking about this. I remember this character of Derrida, I don't remember the name, who refused to believe that he is aging. He is putting on more years. So he started looking old and he just refused. And I think he was a king. So everybody tend to believe him also, or maybe just pretend to believe him. Suddenly after many years, a portrait of him hanging on his wall looked very old and fragile and about to die. This is precisely what the media looks like now. After 20 years of liberalization, because we refuse to believe that it's just liberalization. Nothing else. It's just another story. It's maybe many stories need to be told separately. So I start with this disclaimer. Now look at what happened in the early 90s. In 1992, I came to Delhi. In 1991, like one of the 200 million migrants in the country at that point of time, I was also a migrant in Delhi. But somehow, the country was just picking up. It was in utter chaos. Liberalization just started. Dreams were being just manufactured. And I can clearly remember from because I used to read newspaper as a text. Aspiring to be a journalist, I think that's the minimum we could do. With every cabinet meeting, some part of the economy will be liberalized. And with every decision of the cabinet, you will feel that India, the geographical sense of India is shrinking. How? For example, I think the cabinet took a decision that we will open up the mineral sector. Immediately I remembered, I come from Odisha, so immediately I remember, oh, the coal field that I used to pass through is making news now. So that was the era actually. And I must tell you, from 1991 to 1994, 95, 96, till that point of time when all these dream budgets were being churned out. And one of the finance minister from that era is still the finance minister now, Mr. Chidambaram. And everybody knows about his dream budget, which actually unleashed what the Prime Minister likes to call the animal spirit of India. It started during that point of time. And he was the finance minister. So, the first thing actually happened is that the cabinet meeting with each of them wished to get many of the decisions. And you can feel it in colored place, where most of the commercial offices were placed. And the stock market was the new thing. People actually going in front of the Hindustan Times building and in the ticker monitoring what decision the cabinet is taking. And you will rejoice like anything, oh, they have taken it. Then you come back to your friends and they will also celebrate. this decision has been taken. And one way it was very overwhelming. We never had any doubt to begin with. As a journalist, as a student, as a person, we didn't have any exposure because, as I told you, we refuse to believe that we are about to put on ears. Now, I checked out the headlines. What actually gave you during that point of time? Look at the figure, 92-97, that was the most crucial phase in when most of the critical decisions were taken. If you look at it, 60% headlines on globalization. The two words that were actually featuring very strongly is the liberalism and the globalization. And it's not that during this point the process started. It started much earlier. In fact, the first one, if you look at it, is the Rajiv Gandhi era. But this is the point actually concentrated where we started. And the first symbol of liberalization started in our own life. I remember instead of buying a Colgate toothpaste from each, that's the first alternative I got. The other alternatives, were not very classic kind of things. So the bubble and all these things. So Close-Up was the next multinational product that was coming. And I must tell you, multinational as a coinage was just appearing. Till that point of time, we were nationals. And as I told you, I was very nationalized in my upbringing. Now, as a journalist, what was the dilemma? Miss World contest, we always treated as a, that was the showcase for us as a country. And I remember I have a very dubious background in journalism, so it's not that celebrated one that's why I spend most of my time in down to earth. I used to work for a tabloid, India's only tabloid, first and only, called Sun. And it was influenced by the Britishers and the Canadians type of page-free journalism. That was now it's mainstream, but that point of time it was different kind of journalism. So Miss World was our biggest event. Not only for a tabloid like I work with, but for the most of the newspaper. And remember, Times of India was not what it is today, that point of time. But everybody wanted to showcase Miss World. Now look at what was happening at that point of time elsewhere. A very severe drought was sweeping across western Odisha, part of Rajasthan, part of Karnataka. And as you know that Kalamati was at a point of time infamous for its starvation death. And that was the time actually people died of starvation. And I remember a news meeting when we had a contest. Remember in the tabloid, and I had the courage to say that why not cover the starvation death in Kalahandi as well as the Miss World. And I had friends in other mainstream newspapers and magazines. They were also debating the same thing because the drought was really severe. And marketing managers were actually very wary of this thing that Miss World will get you the maximum advertisements. So it's not a new phenomenon now. That point of time also it happened. So this actually it was building up the dilemma. And I remember this one very starkly because I was involved with it. And for my magazine, yes, I reported about starvation death. We didn't put it on the cover. Miss World and Amitabh Bachchan definitely came on the top. But this is actually was reflecting the dilemma in the media. What to report? When the country was changing and taking a different route, different development path. And at the same time, we are facing the same usual old problems of drought. If you don't call it a famine, politically it's incorrect to call it a famine, but severe drought, that was the kind of dilemma. Now, come to 1997. And I have said that this is India's second partition. It's in fact a landmark year. Just before 97, what we actually was a major part of the liberalization process was to spend less. And how to spend less? basically do away with all the social spending. Remember this word all. Even we are not debating the all part now. That point of time, that was the kind of prescription we had to actually, the country had to implement. Because we had a crisis, money from IMF, there were conditions attached to it. 97. What would have happened if any of you remember why it can be called a partition, second partition for India? Anybody remember, anybody, any memory that of 97? I know you are fairly young. 1997. That was just before that, 1996. Sorry? No. I think I'll just tell you. I think you are. This is the time when India was divided into two groups. One group called the below poverty line group. The other is called the above poverty line. It was, remember, it's a very critical partition of the country. It was not India, Pakistan, but it was not India and Bharat, but it's above poverty line people and below poverty line people. The great debate that we now have over the poverty line and India's public distribution system was made targeted. That's why 1997 actually is a year, landmark year. So from 1997, earlier, as I told you, I also used to access public distribution system. I used to go to the ration shop and have my things and nobody would question me and get the cheap food. Till that point of time, food inflation was not an issue at all because the PDS was actually keeping the market well. Price was not rising. In 1997, this is a landmark turnaround. So the poverty line was never created to target to programs, but it's first time in India's history, maybe in the global level also, that government said that no more universal distribution of food grains. It's only the population below the poverty line will be given the PDS. And from where actually this is the first physical, symbol of splitting the country and taking the other side of the development path. And this created many problems. After this, everything became, BPL and APL. And how the media reported. Again, I must tell you that, go back to that Darius character. We refused. The media didn't take note of it, celebrated this division like anything, saying that alone, this will actually create a boom in the economy. And it was just the year next to your dream budget. And the government was saving huge amount of money. And this is, again, the media which now talks about the below poverty line and the poverty line issue, that point of time is celebrated. And remember, the same people who opposed it did oppose the same thing that point of time. There was huge debate. Starting from JNU to the Indian Institute of Mass Communication to everywhere. And as usual, the communist parties were, I think, protested it. But more or less, everybody supported it. Not knowing that what they were going to do. I forgot to take a slide here. If you look at it, India's calorie intake, get it, graph like this. It was going up like this from 1947 to 1996. And from 1997, it dropped like this. Now you talk about malnutrition, now you talk about everything. So it's another story after 20 years what you do. We have the advantage of hindsight, but the media had actually criminal oversight of this. In the dilemma, what to report, what not to report, which side to take, which side not to take. And even not bothering to be objective also. We forgot this landmark. And from here this story actually got a twist. 1997 is actually a landmark year from the development perspective and also the country's development model, and though you cannot take away the media also. Now look at it. As the country started saving money from the social expenditure, and started liberalization. Something interesting was happening in the headlines of newspapers. You see, many stories have started coming with village, very local deadlines. One of the deadlines is Niyamgiri. One of the deadline is Bellary. And one of the other deadline could be the Belco project in Chhattisgarh. These are the three examples I gave you which are making news now. But there was a difference. That point of time, the headlines, actually how much investment the project drove the headlines. So what does it mean is that the media was actually wild. The finance ministry will give a handout saying we signed a MOU and this is the investment coming. And actually the media went to that place and reported that this is the place which has been starvation death, utterly poor and everything, and this is going to change it. Most of the conflict points made headlines that point of time also, and the trouble and the investment. And there is another fascinating. It's very, it's anecdotal, may look very trivial, but the length of the story was precisely dictated by the size of investment. A small investment of, remember the size of investment at that point of time was 100 crore, 200 crore kind of thing. It's not a billion that we talk about. Billion was still as distant as Mars. And most importantly, the patronage just changed. Incentives to corporate versus subsidies. The 1997 division and creating two India of BPL and APL. Immediately the media started writing about the same subsidies that went to the poor now come to the industry as incentives. It's not called subsidy, remember. And many of you must be tracking the union budget. Look at, now we have in the budget, we have a column there. It's called foregone tax or something like that. How much incentive money, actually tax money, we should have got but given out to the industries by incentive. This is the point of time when it started actually. It was never reported in the budget as it is now. It may be now around 5 to 6 lakh crore rupees. That point of time also it was huge. I'm not telling you that the regime was very regressive at that point of time, but despite all these things, so precisely it happened in the common parlance that the money was being taken away from this side to that side. And with each incentive, the budgets were evaluated, whether it's a dream budget or a nightmare budget. And remember, that point of time, nightmare was not a fiscal term. It was always a dream budget. And everybody enjoyed that dream. But again the media, we refused. We didn't bother actually what it could have done, whether this incentive money can get something out of it. PDS money was very clearly visible, its impact. Food inflation till 1997 was not an Indian issue, and it's precisely due to PDS. And PDS was also created for that reason. One of the objective of public distribution system was to keep the food inflation under control. That happened. While all these things were happening, new businesses were coming, the headlines were changing the deadlines. Now you have a new geography of media emerged. So the media of geography was also changing. So what is the further twist in the story now? Next come to 2000. By 2000 I think something unusual was happening. It's not that Down to Earth has just completed 8 years of publications, but besides that also, we were never in news. As I told you, we are the lonely people, come to the Tughlakabad institutional area, report there, again go back and report there, and people forget us. And our editor used to actually send free copies despite the fiscal burden, and with a request letter saying, please read. And many stories that we did. maybe you may be familiar in current context. One of them is Niyamgiri, one of them is Maoist, one of them is actually loss of language in the hinterland of India. And everything we interpreted in such a way that it was making actually an economic sense. We tried hard to convince the world outside that in Indian context, environment is nothing more than a pure economy. But nobody was actually listening to us, or maybe there is a silent group of people who actually absorbed it and tried to forget it. And we went back to our villages as usual. So now look at, by 2000, 30% headlines looked unusual. Unlike the 2-3 years back, the 60% on headlines on globalization and liberalization. What was unusual with this 30% of headlines? I think this is the time the headlines started, some unusual characters appeared as if, they were not known or something. Maybe some intruders from Pakistan or somebody like this. Very unusual thing. Like a Maoist in a forest in Chhattisgarh. An MNC executive also appeared at the same time in the same forest. And a protesting community. All of three of them, if you look at it, appeared at the same time, doing the same thing, and trying to get a pie of the resources from the local area. And I must tell you that at this stage when we are reporting, we are actually facing first time that when you enter to the same village that you came back after say 5 or 6 years, you feel the contest. It's no more, I think, the local community is actually talking about local water security or regeneration of forest. This Sukoma, Ajri or Ralegan, Siddhi and all these fabled legendary villages. You also feel like a forest guard used to tell me, Saab, nowadays there are two animals in the forest. One is a tiger and another is a Maoist. That point of time it's Naxalite. And you have to manage both of them. And you ask the community, the community is suffering much. There was no reason to actually be so hopeless. Anyway, there. So they're saying, what are they going to do? You come to us to report. The Maoists come at night and also say, let's do a revolution. And the MNC executive also comes say, there is already a revolution in Delhi and we are just coming here to hand you over the vote to you. And they get confused. Everybody wants our benefit, but they want to take away the most crucial part of our livelihood, the forest, the land and the water. So it was a bit confused. Just to give you a small story, is that Utkal Aluminium, it is the same area that Koraput and the Niyamgiri and all those areas. Utkal Aluminium is a multinational companies came together to mine bauxite, one of the fast bauxite mining from that area. It's happening now. That time it had very staunch protest against that. And who was leading this was a lady from the village called Kuchai Padar, Sumani Jogdi. And remember, she is a very fierce leader who stayed in that village, has lost her brother and sister-in-law to starvation. And she is not one of the tribal leaders who has come out of it, has been protesting like anything. I had an opportunity to stay with her at night because I was reporting, so I didn't have any place to stay with her. So during the night, he offered food and I asked her, why do you oppose bauxite mining? Because I also need utensils, at least at my level. She also asked back, why you want to mine from this area? And she explained it. I think that's where the media was actually going haywire. And I am limiting to media because I represent the media. She told me the first thing. Everybody comes here and say we are doing these things for your development. Then she said, don't do this. Then she gave me how to actually develop that area. And she told me that I have one MOA tree. It gives me around 10,000 rupees a year cash. And the trader will straight come to my doorstep and hand over the money to me. What you do basically is that I have already, the village has already a traditional system of you go to any tribal area, the MOA trees will never be chopped. It's an ATM kind of things for them. So he said, just give me another tree. The forest department is also there, just give me another MOA tree. And we are developed. Now, she explains, you will come and mine the place. I lose my land. What I get in exchange is few days of daily wage job. After that, I cannot be an engineer, so I will not join you also the company. So after that, what I do? Then next to next day, Biju Patnaik was traveling. And I again chased her. Means I remain a reporter, despite it may look very insensitive, but I chased her to the Biju Patnaik's meeting. So Biju Patnaik asked her, why you are opposing? So it will change and everything in its own way. He's a great leader at that point of time. And she asked one thing to him. If suppose tomorrow we get bauxite under the Odisha assembly, beneath Odisha assembly, will you dig up and displace yourself, the MLAs and everything? And Biju Patnaik left, and he was a very smart politician. Day after, I think 2 days after, he declared that Sumani Jogdi is my tribal advisor. So anyway, this is the context actually. And something interesting happened. I realized that we are becoming the upstream journalist now. This is the change which was taking place in the media also. Suddenly, not only India split in 1997. During this point of time, the media also split into two, upstream and mainstream. I think everywhere in a stream you go, there will be upstream and mainstream. There should not be a, I believe so, means going by the geography of a stream. Every point of time you will have upstream and mainstream. I don't know who has coined this, but we were told that in any press conference or anywhere go, we'll sit somewhere there, stand there, and these are the upstream. And these are the mainstream. So this is the division between the Miss World and Stardust and Death in Kalamani. So the media was also actually going through a split. And it was happening because there was no very intense debate among the media. It's not that the editors put together their brains and actually went for a partisan like India and Pakistan. It's not that. It's just that there was confusion, there was refusal from our side to acknowledge. And I think in plain language, if you put it, the media, I think Justice Kardju was in problem, but we have fools that point of time. So we never thought about what is happening. But our prime job was to do this precisely, to capture the changing time, to report, to disseminate. And we were not getting things to do it. Now, almost 15 years gone. And the story was changing. And the twist was always there. What was the twist? The twist was actually the story was one way complete. The story was actually overwhelming. Finally, when a down-to-earth reporter goes to a village, there was a huge change. We got confused exactly. What are we reporting? Whether we are reporting from a village or from America or from Europe. There was almost, the moment now we enter a village, there is a death of distance. Globalization, liberalization, complete in India, and the storyline, the change in the story also is complete. As I told you in the beginning, like that character, suddenly we realize that our portrait has become old. But we refuse to believe that. And that's how we landed up in a scenario. I think this is the last 10 minutes of, I just take it. So what happens now? I go back to a village in Chhattisgarh. I have been going to that village for n number of times, tracking for different actually stories, the same characters, family. So in 2010, I go to a village in Chhattisgarh and inquire about the minor forest produce. I think these are the non-timber forest produces that we have been looking for. And suddenly I found that the sal, I think you all of, this is the sal tree, seed of sal tree. It's actually great minor forest produce. It has enormous economic value for the local tribals. And it has a great market also. And it's very lucrative that the government wants to do business with that also, to earn some money out of it. Suddenly I found that many villages, many families have stock of sal seeds. And they tell us that the sal seed, we are not able to sell it. And I think the economy, the local economy is diving. I asked one of the family, why you are not selling this time? You know, her reply was very blunt. She told me, you people have stopped eating chocolates. You know, sometimes I have also a bit complex, inferiority complex while reporting, because you cannot spend the whole life learning every moment of it. So that's what, precisely. I also took a break from learning, but it was there. So I asked my another friend who took me there, who has been working in the local area, and I asked him, why this connection? Chocolate I don't eat, but I have a daughter. I was also interested to know, why this chocolate will be so much relevant to the local economy. And remember, this not selling sal seed almost amounted to 2-3 months of food insecurity or starvation for a tribal family. It's that important. So he also couldn't say. He said he promised that I'll get back to you on the connection. Then we went, all the query went in cycle, finally reached to that same lady. We asked her, now tell us. And I am away for it. I am back to Delhi, and again, as I told you, we come back to Delhi and find stories. So finally we got the message. You know, it was not that chocolates we were consuming. A small remote village in Chhattisgarh is starving because the Europeans have stopped consuming more chocolates. And why they have stopped consuming more chocolates? Recession is there. They are not able to actually buy as much as they used to earlier. What is the link? The sal seed is usually used to harden the chocolate, and it's being exported. Now suddenly the geography is shrunk. It was not a cabinet decision that day, but it shows that what critical actually the globalization has impacted the local economy. And how this women actually got to know, because her relatives work in a chocolate factory and they overheard things and all these things. Suddenly you just imagine Europe and this village in these things. So the story also changed. And you look at the local newspapers, many have reported. You know, the tribals are suffering, government is not procuring sal seeds. And beyond that, nobody went. Yes, we went beyond it, and we also got shocked. Now there are so many examples like this. How the storyline is changing, suppose. What could be the linkages? You know, how globalized is the village economy now? I think Guar Phali, all of you know. We don't consume much, but we know about that. In the eastern India, they consume a lot. Suddenly, you know, one of my colleagues here also, he reported about it. This Guar Phali price actually is increasing. Say in Jodhpur, you know, the villages in and around. And farmers are like very much interested to suddenly take up Guar Phali cultivation. And the story was actually the local story. Somewhere district correspondent filed a thing, said they got a good money this time. Nobody went beyond it. And the stories came to us also. We also didn't want to go much beyond. Bit fatigued also, 20 years. But still, you know, why it's happening? Why suddenly Guar is Indians have taken a liking for Guar. I don't think it's many Indians would love to eat that in that quantity. Then what could be its? Suddenly we found that it's being exported, a product of it. So it's not only that we export it, have Americans quit actually eating junk food and have taken a liking for guacamole? No. We then discovered that it's actually very intimately linked to the energy crisis in America. That's how the story actually evolved. America had just started in a big way the shale gas as a major source of energy. So to get that gas actually you have to inject water and something like that so the gas comes out. One of the ingredients of that process to get the gas out of it is a paste of the guar seed. And because India produces 90% of the world guar and in that Rajasthan produces most of that. Suddenly the village is actually very closely linked to the American energy crisis. And the story doesn't end here. Suppose Down to Earth also reported. The media actually forgot. Then I think the international media picked up. I think the media was also confused whether suppose the reporters in America, whether they will report it as a local story, what's happening there, the shale gas and the energy crisis. We are also confused whether we are doing a district level story or something like that. But we made the link. But we also, while doing the story, we also missed. Suppose if you have done this also. You know, we do remember and write about farmer suicide. Maybe this is the place where we can alert that in future there may be suicides. Americans are clever people. The guar price may be coming down at a point of time and there will be a dive in the market. And the kind of money you have invested now, you may not be able to pay back. That's how the debt trap starts. This is precisely what happened in Anandpur district in Andhra Pradesh, which is considered, we can tell you, the first actually global story that unfolded at a very local level. So, next, Indore and Germany. Drug trials, we know, by this time the story is again very popular. More than 3,000 people have died during drug trials. We reported it's just simple drug trial deaths. And we have a habit in India, 200, 300 deaths, then okay, it's warrants maybe, two reporters, one looking at the death and the other looking at it going beyond the headline, not much. I think maybe just at the entry point. But what is the link? When actually the drug trial started, the local newspaper said that poor are getting great health benefits out of it. Everybody forgot, the media forgot to ask that why only the poor actually are opting for drug trials? Why the hospital is more than charitable to accept them? And why it's always that these are the actually people who die also and nothing happens. Yes, it's poverty. As you know, it's out-of-pocket health expenditure. If you calculate in the poverty level of India, the poverty level is too much. It's a major issue. And we stopped at Indore. We stopped at the district hospital of Indore. We don't go beyond it. But the moment you go a step ahead, you found that it's a part of the larger global story about drug trials. Unknowingly, India has already become the capital of it. And suddenly when you break the story or do it, there is a loss. And India, during all this time, because the media failed to do all this thing, inform, we never had regulations over it. So this is how actually, wherever you go now, any village you enter, there is an interplay of the global and the local factor. Now I mentioned about the Bellary. Bellary was a headline also. But remember that headline actually had a premature death. Nothing happened in Bellary till it was declared that China is going to hold the Olympic. The boom in mining in Bellary was a local story. It was celebrated to begin with, but its global link was the Olympic. And remember, it's not actually Olympic. It's a part of the global trend at point of time that China actually led is to store as much as minerals possible. And the Bellary scam and the devastation to the local ecology in Bellary due to mining is precisely driven by this. So many people reported it about a boom to begin with, then a devastation to begin with. Again, it's local. Till you have some big politicians being arrested, and if it's worth 2,000 crore rupees worth scandal, then it comes to it. But hardly anybody reported about this. So maybe Bellary was checked, but it's happening elsewhere also now. Now this is also, what's linked to a small district in Odisha to Brazil and the Anganwadis to the global experience of fighting malnutrition. I think nobody would bother now. Any media will not report about the Anganwadi. We have millions of them in the country. And Anganwadi, what is that? May be the standard question. Unless again a scam comes to it. Odisha actually, media reported about Anganwadis when there was a scam of 100 crore rupees. Some dal was, Herakritha, and one minister was sacked due to that and all. But remember this. This is a very interesting small Anganwadi story where the Anganwadi has taken a decision that for our all food that will feed to the children will come from local sources. 30-40 children, so 30-40 eggs a week, then vegetables at least 20 kg, 25 kgs, then dal, then rice, everything. And they decided to procure it. Remember, there is a Supreme Court order on it. But this may be the first case of it. So they procured locally. And suddenly the kitchen garden never used to give anything, now is earning money. And the women saw an opportunity. They came together, they built a self-help group and started community farming. And it's a big economy now. It's no more limited to one Anganwadi. It's catching up with other Anganwadis. And suddenly, if you just translate this into, it will be something like 15 to 16,000 crore rupees in the country can go to the local communities. We report it. Do we report as a media just a ignore or the sweet or cute stories that we say in the media parlance, or just ignore it? Maybe many things are happening like this across the country. But it's precisely what this actually Brazil did. And Lula actually got re-elected. And it's, this legendary image of Lula, this example is inspired by one of that. In Brazil, they have a law that says that the 30 to 40% food program, the food requirement under the food program must be procured local. So, I think a media missed this point. Either they create a story, if they want to do it also, somewhere it comes, then I have to also catch up, so I do it. We just say that, this is a local story. That's why what happens, when we talk about now expenditure for ICDS, Integrated Child Development Scheme, or the money that we earn to transfer to Anganwadis, get a bad reportage, isolated reportage of saying it's a bad expenditure. Because we ignored the story to begin with, that it would have solved the poverty crisis in the village. Even now, when the food security bill is being talked about, nobody goes to this point of time. The food security bill has a huge opportunity to actually give a stimulus to the local economy. So that's what we miss. And I will draw through the rest. Now, this I think we also be concerned about it. I think we have timber and wood everywhere. But look at, in many, just pick up any African newspaper, you will find a local story. This claim is fighting over this patch of forest with that claim. quite frequent. That's a local story, definitely, for Africa, any country. But nobody bothered to ask why they are fighting. They fight, but why over a patch of forest, not land? Why not over flipped out? That local story can actually trace back to us in India. In India, nobody asks this question actually. We talk about forest conservation, do this, so many trees were chopped while doing metro and all these things. This is a very, this clinical way of looking at the environment. Few tigers, few trees we should conserve and all these things. But nobody bothered to ask from where do this booming middle class gets its wood and timber. When knowing that India as a policy, commercial ago it was 6 countries, now more than 64 countries. And what's happening there? Our timber demand is so high that, in fact, the clans in Africa have started fighting over to control a forest and to export to India and get some quick money. So this is, one way if the African newspaper reported it, there is local story, they are also globalizing and forgetting that how it's happening. And coming back to India, we never reported these things. And remember, just to take it back, you need to conserve forest, there is no doubt about it. But trees are also biological entities, they will die one day. It is not that the trees will stand forever. But remember, the Prime Minister once said that the money does not grow in tree. He became very popular and rarely he speaks, but this is one of his rare when he spoke. But actually in Indian context, money does grow in tree. We are a completely biomass based economy. We never reported that we by just curbing this. Look at the kind of money we siphoning being taken out of the country. And ideally the tribals should have the first right over it. Now if you say this, either you are a Maoist or an upstream journalist who has some sympathy or maybe whatever else. But we are not mainstream to begin with. But remember, we have globalized. Globalization is no more upstream and mainstream. It's completely stream. So that's how it's. And finally, to finish the story, we plotted 3 months of down to earth stories. And look at how it looks like. Let's look at the stories, local stories and the global and out. It looked like this. Most of our local stories we never thought about have global linkages. And most of the global stories actually we never thought about have very local impact. So the point basically is that we are the media is in actually situation that we have polarized ourselves, and the polarization is not based on any very deep thinking that we need to take a stand. It's just that ignorance. And I can say that this is a criminal oversight from the media that we never bothered to actually reflect a transition the country made. And now suddenly when you say that Niyamgiri is a conflict, Bellary is a conflict, Maoist is the most, I think, the most serious internal security threat. Then, the latest is that the country's economy is being pulled down by all these things. Then the question comes, who allowed it first? Remember, the policymakers have their own way of doing things. The point is that the media never thought about it. And never wanted to link it, never wanted to go beyond it. And we come to a situation now where it's very overwhelming. I must tell you I have also friends from media and all this. Everybody is grappling with this. How to actually look at the situation now? Should I be politically correct and say that Mela Patkar is right? But again, it's true also, no? How can you oppose everything? Then should I say actually Vedanta is right? Then should I say 54,000 crore rupees, the highest, the biggest FDI in the country, should be actually compromised with for palm cultivations or farms? We are confused. And the confusion comes from the fact that we are not clear. And why we are not clear? Because we refuse to acknowledge. Come back to the Dario character. We refuse to believe that we are aging. We are in a new age. The portrait is already showing. The headlines are already showing that we messed up. But we remained, I think, that way the whole media is actually off screen now. It's not actually in the mainstream of the country. It has not caught up with the change in the country. So what the small group of reporters who used to go and report on it were being categorized as off-stream, I think the whole media has become off-stream. It can be anytime used, can be abused, because we don't have that kind of thing. I think this is the biggest challenge also the media is facing. And look at few of these trends that are coming up, as I explained you also. Globalization makes every story a global development, and every global development is unfolding as a local story. As I told you in Anandpur, way back in during the Rajiv Gandhi's time, when we opened up our edible oil market, the first farmer suicide was reported from Anandpur. Just a few years ago back, the same farmers were told that you go for groundnut, we will procure, because you have an oil deficit, edible oil deficit, production deficit. Suddenly they opened it up as a commitment. And what do? These are small farmers, invested heavily, no way to now. The palm oil is actually cheaper than the groundnut oil they produce. The market failed and the first suicide. And maybe the same thing may happen with the guar farmers also in the future. But the media remains segregated, as I pointed out. And we have not explored the missing links. We have just ignored them and wanted them to be the links which should be missing, because that question ourselves. And we are all part of a system that has also changed. Yes, it's true that the media is also a business proposition. We need to make profit. All magazines and newspapers are not down to earth, remember. We also do struggle in a different way. But nobody stopped us from informing the missing links. Rather, I think I find that Somani Jogli is a better reporter than a reporter like me. So the net result, what is happening now? So you open up a newspaper or a magazine, stories remain stories. Niyamgiri is a conflict. Tribal right to worship is a conflict. Vedanta is a conflict. Maoist is a conflict. Bellary is a conflict. Chhattisgarh is a state full of conflicts. And the whole economic recession is also a conflict. Every story, all the stories are interlinked, but we give them separate identity, and we forget actually which way. But if you want to link it actually, it starts right here, very cyclical way it revolves. I think as far as media is concerned and the development reporting is concerned, the world is not flat. It's very cyclical. The same way that I found the link between economic recession in Europe and the production of salt seed. Now the challenge is reworking the story. I think that's the biggest challenge. Nobody can tell us how to rework a story. The story has already been reworked at the local level, at the global level. And how do we now rework a story? It's not as simple as posting as the editor will rewrite my piece and say that the development is over and we have actually linked it. It's not. I think the best way, one of the way I see it, that the media needs to re-educate itself on the last 20 years transition that the country has made, and need to acknowledge that the world has changed. So has the country, so has its resources, so has its people. And it's no more a simple village level contest over a small resources between two families. The families are different now. And the two families are, one is a village, the other is the global setup. So Anil Agrawal of Vedanta will be fighting with Sumani Jogli directly now. It's as much that. And the media can revert the story only by approaching the story. I'm not saying it just approach the story from Sumani Jogli or from Anil Agrawal side, Vedanta, the Anil Agrawal of Vedanta. But look at the two sides. And if you look at the two sides in a globalized situation, it does converge, though with contesting, results. But we need to do that. Thank you very much. Any questions?
Thank you, Richard, for a very fascinating presentation of the blinkers of the media in how it reports or not, or does not report the links between the global and the local, how it misses out on the interplay between the global and the local. I'm sure many of you would have questions. So we'll just take a round of questions and then Richard will answer them, and then we can have another round. But I would request you to be very brief. Please just introduce yourself.
Hello everyone. I'm Sumit from Delhi University. My question is that when we speak about globalization, like W2 and all those organizations, are we falling in the hands of other global countries and losing our autonomy and freedom of trade? Because they are asking for ourselves to trade something, and in return we have to give something. Then in this case, we are losing our degree of freedom and autonomy. Your concern on that?
Of course. The last example I gave you, the second partition in India, 1997. That's the first example, if you can take it, that we lost our autonomy. That we cannot in fact supply food to all of us. It's true. Then the question comes about your globalization. See, globalization is a completely market force. Market force does not respect equity. Equity is not something that market will respect. Because by its own character, it actually supports some people more than others. Your equity can, under globalization, can be your corporate social responsibility, a bit of charity. So yes, the equity part we have lost under globalization. That's very clear.
That was a very enlightening short presentation. One thing I just wanted to ask you, because you are from media and we know there is a segregation in the media. In the mainstream media, which gets most of the attention of the population, do they actually have time to reflect the daily media I'm talking about? Sometimes I feel that daily media, sometimes I feel it should be stopped now, because they don't have any time to reflect upon it. It's a daily rush to report. There is no time to think. Whether it's a good thing, they're reporting what the repercussion will be. think still there is a hope for monthly journals or quarterly journals. They have some time, benefit of time, the luxury of time, think what they are going to do.
I can only comment a bit on this. Is that, yes, I think that's a practical problem of a daily newspapers. But just imagine the daily newspapers publishing from Chhattisgarh, Jharkhand, Odisha, any other, or from Bellary. It's a daily news for them. Who stopped them writing a Soni Jogri saying this? And she is a equal stakeholder in the whole development process. You know, nobody actually, I have not seen many local newspapers also where it's a daily news for them. Reporting that this tribal women actually wants to say this, wants to actually see the whole process of this. So the question is that there are different layers of things. Yes, maybe the Delhi constituency is different, but nobody is stopped from the local newspaper. And I must tell you from my experience with many local newspapers and people, all of them get actually the same perspective as what we have been talking about here. They understand it also a bit. But the question comes, I think, while reporting this excuse of daily, but they are reporting on the same thing. Just example, say the newspaper published from Koraput in Odisha, which is the Niyamgiri as the happening event. Nobody stopped any reporter to do a daily newspaper or a daily newspaper saying that actually tribals wanted to say this or wanted to see the whole process this way. No. Even as middle level executive of Vedanta turn around the media reportage, even at the local level. So I think it's not as simple as a logistic problem of, I don't have time to report on this, so I just report on any this thing. I think it is much more. That's my.
I'm Ajit Kumar, founder of Vision 2030, Kushi Grams and the Oceanic Group. My question is, can we, or do you suggest, or should we go back to our traditional lifestyles, which we can to some extent, or you will tell more because we have been to various places. Look at our resources that we have and look at it with a different eye, maybe eye of our grandparents or elders, and see how we were known as golden sparrow or Sonikipedia, and think of innovative ways, putting all these pieces together, integrating all the resources that we have and the minds that we have, and some people who want to go back to their villages from who have been in the big cities. I also want to go back to my village. So, what do you suggest? What do you feel?
I think you are welcome at your village, but let's look at this from this perspective. 60% of India's agriculture is land. It means fed by rain only. There is no irrigation. They have been practicing traditional farming method. Around 70% of India's poor economy is dependent on agriculture or forest produces. That's also the traditional livelihood. So a large number of the majority of people are actually practicing the traditional livelihood sources. But the question comes, as I said, which model is actually you are trying to promote and to switch people to that? For example, 92% of the employment comes from informal sector. Most of them from the environment related like agriculture, forestry and all this. 8% is only of the other model that for which everybody focuses on. So it is encouraged, I think, for people like you and me, we can have all the luxury to go back and do and all these things. But the country is already, I think, it's a traditional livelihood based economy. The threat comes from the fact that we are too much obsessive about the growth model. Everything, the growth model is like the growth rate is the new religion. The people are more eager to listen to a prayer than to a news anchor saying ki what is the growth rate today declared by RBI. So this is actually an obsession, and it's also very difficult to switch over. 92% of the population will be switched over to the other model. That's quite impossible to begin with. So the contest actually comes from that. It's the contest between the Sumani Jogudi and Biju Patnaik. There were two development models. One model may be working, the growth model must be working for many people. It's working for us, I think. But it's not working for the rest of the people who are the majority. But the majority of the actually policies and the investment that we make is for the least amount of economy.
Hello sir, this is Sumit from IIMC. My question is actually, as we were discussing earlier, and you did it very well, and it was very nice to listen to you actually, that in this era of globalization, corporatization and all that things, being as a media person, that all the corporate houses are coming in media sector, they are having a huge partnership in media sector and all that. So, like we were discussing in village level programs and all the environmental related things, that can we expect from that media person or the media houses that they will work for the poorer or the person those who are that below or that line. In this time, like media has become a profession or a business only. So how we can expect from that business type of thing that it will work for the betterment of that people, those who are not in mainstream, or good people who are out of that line actually.
Being a journalism student, we all know that newspaper is a product that survives on two revenues. One is the circulation, and the other revenue is advertising. Without circulation, no advertising. So this idea about like corporate taking over and not giving news, see, it kills, rather it kills circulation. And this is precisely what a bit of green shoot is coming in media now. I am not naming, but most of the mainstream newspapers are talking about expansion. Expansion where? Not in Delhi, Mumbai and kind of things. Expansion in the second tier, third tier and the semi-urban kind of areas. That's why this multi-editions. And if you don't give local newspapers, nobody will read it. So it's actually a part of the business model. But the problem comes that, like that, come back to that character I mentioned. We have not only refused to acknowledge, also we have started actually accepting that. Our refusal is the best way to do it. So it's not happening. I think the most market-savvy newspaper, if you remember, is now giving awards for grassroots innovation, recognizing rural leaders. Why is that? It's market. So remember, the market is also playing up in the rural areas. So it's not, it's just our, I think, the sense, but the business model is changing definitely. So you have, I think, opportunities in multi-editions now. You have opportunities for such stories. But we don't know how to put it actually. That's the problem also.
Hello.
Yes. Can we take 2-3 questions together and then can you?
Okay.
Is it right? Can you quickly ask?
Yeah, thanks for such a thought-provoking presentation, first of all. And continuing where you have left, I have a small dilemma. Like reporting on a local issue from Delhi, or for that matter any state, for example, US or European state, it would be much easier in terms of objectivity and distance. Like you are distant, so you can see it objectively. But for the local newspapers or the local reporter, won't it be very difficult in the sense that then if they are reporting about that particular, for example, a tribal women being cited, won't it be like taking sides in a political context, particularly in context of the state politics? Thank you.
Editor, my compliment for this very natural lecture, no artificiality about it. Now question relating to tribal, when you have divided the whole thing, is it okay? Between mainstream and offstream. Now I was wondering how do you place the paradox of tribal community and its economy, particularly in Jharkhand and the area which you have covered in Orissa and also Chhattisgarh. Now the interesting thing is, and you will have to reply, don't you think the chiefs join the mainstream and the poor tribals belong to the offstream? And this is because economics and political forces, they are the root causes of globalization.
I want to ask you, we don't see the human aspect of any news. We always see the popular aspect of any news. So I want to ask you, is only popular news drawing people's attention? Because there may be popular angle in any news which belongs to the ruler or village people.
Can I answer? I think let me answer. I think your question about the
सर एलपीजी सिस्टम में सर आपने प्राइवेटाइजेशन को ज़्यादा फोकस चीज़ नहीं बताई, इसको कुछ जाना है। और पीपीपी मोड जो अभी रिसेंटली वो धीरे धीरे पब्लिक सेक्टर में पड़ रहा है, प्राइवेट पार्टी क्या मीन्स है इसका प्राइवेटाइजेशन के आने के बाद और क्या इम्पैक्ट
ठीक है, मैं आंसर करता हूँ अभी। Your question about this difficulty in a reporter from Delhi can get it easily, and a reporter actually at the local level on a local development will have difficulty. I think if you look at it at the practical level, both sides are having problem now currently. Those who are reporting from Delhi, say for example, economic recession in India, are just reporting it from the growth side, are not having any local linkages. You only talk about, middle class impacts. At the same time, they hardly also know, I don't know whether they know it or not. The government has actually programmed to monitor the impact of economic recession on the livelihood at the local level also. Government has done that service for you also. So at the same time, at the local level also, reporters do feel the same pinch, saying that my story is local, whether it will go to the national or not. So what is the missing link? Missing link is the same. The national reporter not getting the link to the local because he or she has not understood it or is not bothered to do it, or maybe that is the format they want to report. At the same time, the local reporter has also not bothered to actually look at the linkages. And somewhere I told you also, means my experience with many reporters that many stories that we got it are from the local, and we became global reporters using them. So it's maybe a bit, I think, lack of understanding or just ignoring that part of you, whether I need to do that or not. But in the longer term, as I pointed out, without doing that, whether you report or don't report, that's another question. But not knowing the story in totality is killing. Now coming back to your question, sir. Your question was, if I got it right, is this tribal economy or the rural economy versus the growth.
Actually, my question is very simple. Actually, what I want to convey to you is, you have worked in this area and I have also partly. And actually, there is a paradox. When you divide the mainstream versus offstream, what is happening is that the rich people or the chiefs of the tribals in Chhattisgarh, they join the mainstream, whereas the communities who are to be taken care of, they join the offstream.
I got your point, sir. Sir, this is a political debate, I think, Japni. I don't get me wrong, but most of the time, in terms of many people say, Mayavati is a Brahmin Dalit. This is what has happened. We cannot stop actually those who were oppressed. They are representatives of the assumed leadership, turning side and joining the other side. This, I think, for me, there is no clinical assessment of it, but a prospective assessment is that we have overplayed the growth model. And we see that we believe that the growth model is going to help you out. But that situation may be changing. Why? First, it's 20 years why the same area of India remains poor. The level of poverty remains the same. There are other people who are going above poverty line. But there is a certain group of people who remain always poor from 1947 till now. There is not much change if you look at all the poverty survey. And which are these areas? Actually, these are the areas where most of your minerals, factories and other things are. There is a change. People have started asking these questions. Despite 20 years of this new model being played out, why we remain poor? Then comes your idea about is that the tribal economy. It's perfectly right that this local economy will never be, or this local poverty can never be eradicated with growth model. Because growth has its own, it doesn't respect equity. It will not distribute property or wealth in an equitable way, rather it will take it away, as it has been happening. Now the third, I am just arguing, means giving you a fact, I don't have an answer to it. What is that, if you actually divide the economy, the growth as the mainstream and the rest of this upstream, then I have an example. India has world's smallest farmers. Most of the time we say that, no, the actually agriculture is cooling down us. We need to, shift out of agriculture. We need to go for industry and all these things. It does employ close to 70% of the population. India has world's smallest farmers. India is one of the biggest consumer of food grains. India is also food self-sufficient. It means the smallest farmer in the world has two big responsibilities. Ensure the food security of the country as well as ensure his or her own food security. And this is the big economic model which is in existence. And currently, if you look at it, the current growth rate that we are getting is due to the rural consumption. So I think for me the rural economy is more robust, has been very sensitive to the national interest and all these things. So this is my perspective. I think I'm just putting the facts before you. I don't have an answer actually how to do that. And your question about privatization and all. See, when I say liberalization, privatization is just part of that, outcome of that. What have you done with privatization? Yeah, I'll come to that. First, look at it. This. Why the PPP model? PPP model, as we all know, the private, public, and partnership. See, look at. I have only one issue with it. I believe that the government should not actually forget its most important role of governance and do business like manufacturing needles, aeroplanes, and all this. One way, you don't expect government to do all these things. But the question comes here, that private sector is being hyped or being sold as an alternative because it's not efficient. It delivers. It gives you the services. Now the question comes. I just gave you another service provider, this small farmer in India. What kind of incentives do you give to small farmers in the country? But he or she still gives you the most important service of food self-sufficiency. Right? Now look at the private sector. In the budget, if you look at it, last budget, I think, I'm just giving you, I don't remember the exact figure, but it's around 5-6 lakh crore rupees of incentives. What have they done? The moment the recession is in, the moment you want to increase the tax a bit, they say ki, we cannot do business. So who is actually subsidized? So my point what I am saying is the private sector has been overhyped as an efficient model of service delivery. Now coming back to your specific PPP model, government is already rethinking about it. Which one is, I think, if you know PPP, there is not a single model to actually show that it is one. PPP model are actually mostly the public model. In the private and public, if you look at it, the public aspect has been more pronounced. That's why the airport metro is finally with the metro railway. It's not with the Reliance. So that's the question actually. As I told you, the liberalization process, the market is only looks at profit. It's their character, so you have to accept that. When you look at profit, equity is just killed. So that's it. Achha, your question about the popular story. I have a question. What is a popular story for you? I gave you something. Do you find it popular?
Popular story is what is actually happening across the country, which are eye-catching. But actually, it talks about the rural people and talk about village economy and all that. These issues remain unnoticed and goes unnoticed sometimes. So if it is brought to public notice or public domain, then it is not being done by the media, by and large. So
I have a practical suggestion for all of us. I think this is actually a great question because we do face what is a popular story, how I can sell a story. Remember, despite all this big debate about development process and all these things, it boils down to a newsroom meeting and selling story. Chocolate is definitely a popular story. So I can sell that story, right? And fortunately or unfortunately, BPL is another sexy story nowadays. Not a company, but a bigger poverty line. The poverty line itself. That's also popular. The poverty line is very popular. So you have the opportunity to actually push your analysis into it. And when I'm saying people are pushing for it also, but don't push it so hard that somebody wants to live in 18 rupees per day. No need for doing that. Already poor are suffering, they are in existence. Why I need to survive on 18 rupees and to inform the world? No need for that. But you can actually use all these things. You have to make it also popular. For example, Delhi. As a Delhi, I want to know, say in labor markets, 200 labor markets in Delhi. And take it from me, you need not to travel any part of the country. Just go to this labor market and you will get a pulse of what's happening in the country. Is it a drought here this year? Has the industries in, say, Trichur, which is a textile hub? Tirupur has revived or not, has closed down? These are also. So it's not just a clinical analysis of what is popular, but also pushing a story from which perspective. A different new angle that comes out of a better understanding of an issue also is something new, which any newspaper I believe will be interested.
Hello. My question is like, I heard we remove the poverty from India. Slogan, state, our central government quotation is, I'm thinking, I'm looking when I look the newspaper and when I read the newspaper. So it's like removing the poor from the state, like Jharkhand. Like in the present scenario, everyone is there from journalism. So I just want to raise my point of view. Like everyone talking about tribes and moist
when we talk about tribes and all, like they are threat for India. Like we are going a like civil war. Like central government is deploying the army in that part of Jharkhand and all. Like when you go look into the like Kashmir and east, like northeast part, like everyone is state, it's dominating towards them.
You be a little more specific.
Yeah. So we are not like following our constitution rules. No, we are violating our constitution.
It is in fact, it is a contest now. Whether it's a village or anywhere you go. See this, what it has created is that now there is a contest of resources. Two groups want desperately. The mineral which is found in a tribal area, the tribals are also equally fighting for it because that gives them water, they host their forest. At the same time, Vedanta and other multinational companies also, other people like us, want that also desperately. So it is a situation of contest and severe contest. If you don't acknowledge and work out it, what you say is that it's true. Everything will be compromised in this. The constitution is already compromised. And about your question, I think this on the just think we have to remove the poor. Take it from me. The way we measure our poverty and the poor, identify our poor, we have not identified our poor properly, but they will never be removed. It's just like a stock market. The rain falls for 2 days and poverty level goes up. The same way that Manmohan Singh opens his mouth and the Sensex goes up. So it's just that way. It's actually very artificial. So don't bother much about that. The poor will be removed. They will be there. They are very resilient people. Remember, as I told you, the smallest farmer may be poor, but giving you the best services at the moment. So it is a contest situation.
Thank you for a very insightful presentation. I just have a very simple question, or maybe your thoughts on concretization of agricultural land. Isn't it a big story, or is it not important enough that nobody is addressing it? Whenever we open the newspaper, all we see is huge advertisements of green homes, and all these green homes are literally being made in the middle of agricultural land. Recently, I visited Pune, and what I found was that the whole agricultural area is scattered with these new buildings that are coming up. And I believe the agricultural minister, I guess, is one of the largest owners of land and dream homes and cities and malls and all that they have built. So isn't that a story that should be written about or talked about? Thank you.
It is a huge story.
Nobody is writing about it.
Yeah. Download the report about it. But now look at it. It's a big story. Let's take it as a case. How your popular aspect to it and the non-popular side of the story. Non-popular side, I think the story is very clear. It's a trend that, as you said, we are losing agricultural lands. And it's not only an Indian problem only, it's a global problem now. The whole world has less areas for cultivation of food grains than just say 20 years back. It's already threatening the food security and the production.
Precisely.
Yeah. And inside India, look at it. In fact, Indian industrialists are smart enough now. They have already seen the future. Many Indian companies are going to African countries and buying lands. Because it's already actually inside it now. Now the question comes. The big question about expansion of the urban areas. That you said that the many townships are coming up. I think it's not only eating into the agricultural land, those impacting your food grain productions, it's also killing your water. Now the question comes, from where do we get water in Delhi? We have already traveled 400 kilometers to the hills. You know, this is what most of the cities in India, they expand also because they don't have their own sources of water. And what they do is that we expand and we get farther and farther out to rural areas to source our water, which should have been the local sources of water. Now, this is another conflict which unfolded. The water demand of Delhi versus the water demand of Uttarakhand. The water demand of expanding Bangalore versus the water demand of the few villages whose water sources are being earmarked for Bangalore. So this is one aspect. So the two aspects I think, one is that agricultural land, it's a big story. India is already, I think, next week you may get a survey on it. Like the NSSO survey recently, the census report said that we are losing farmers, which is a trend. Next survey is coming, which will tell you exactly how much agricultural land we have lost. You know, I guarantee you, given our understanding in the media and not looking beyond what the story, it will be just reported that we have lost this much agricultural land. And chances are there, state like Gujarat may hype it up saying that we are the best model. Because most of our agricultural lands have gone to industry. We are industrialized and look at this one. So that's actually the how you look at it.
How do you impact the policy makers to take decisions on stopping something like this?
See, stopping from where it will come, the media has to do is brief normal job of informing the whole story.
Right, so make it into an issue and a debate which perhaps could impact.
Yeah.
Because most of the politicians are builders actually.
Exactly, the first job of media is to inform in totality. Then there are, policy groups are there, advocacy groups are there, various people who actually take you to top and hide it. But we are not doing the basic job also properly. So the fundamentals are wrong actually. That's the problem. Okay,
Good evening, sir. I'm Atul from IMC. My question is, you raised a question on mainstream media. They are not taking issues as they should do. But the role of social media in this particular area, like I read this on internet, like what is happening in Miangiri and what is POSCO project and all, what is happening over there. So what do you really think means we people actually are not dependent on mainstream media only. We people are actually going to do social and all. So we are getting news from social media also. So isn't it means mainstream, if we left mainstream media, means social media is also actually doing a great job in this.
It is in fact, that's a great thing to happen. Social media, I think if you look at the Facebook, they're the second largest populated republic in the world now. More than 1 billion people organized according to choices, preference and everything and being analyzed always. I think that's a great. It liberated the medium. It's a common property. Despite all the restrictions, I think that's one. Maybe the growth of the social media as a communication form is due to this restrictive or the non-objective way of reporting from the media. That may be the reason. Many people are saying that. We ourselves now pick up stories from social media, saying that what's happening where and maybe get a sense of it. What you call the crowdsourcing and all this thing also we do. Yes, it's true. I think that makes everybody an informer now. But again, not understanding the issue in totality is still a threat.
So, my name is Ranveer. I'm a student of Delhi University. A few weeks ago, I was researching a report for FICCI and I came across, so this has two sides. On one hand, I was looking at growth percentage, and I was looking at the agricultural growth over the last 15 years, and there were significant drops which I was asked to investigate. Drops to the extent of -6.6% in the year 2002-2003. While this is an issue picked up by some economic researchers, it's not much talked about as far as I've seen in recent years. seeing that on the other hand, your services sector has about 8 to 10% growth. The growth model on one side. On the other hand, in the agricultural sector itself, while we have a lot of reading about farmer suicides, like in the Dharm, etc., because of, say, Monsanto, nobody seems to be catching up on the local news of how suicides may have dropped or changes over the last few years. Because I've seen some of the projects there. Local climate itself, how the situation was, has significantly changed. The projects taken care. Neither of the two sides have been picked up. Can you shed light on this?
See, that's very much true that it has not been picked up.
Can we take this question also? So
Yeah,
that,
yeah, very good.
actually, somebody told us that we should switch on to traditional way of development, traditional way of healing. But what I think that as even you said that we have a mindset and we are very much into this consumerism today that we cannot switch on to traditional way, right? So what I say and what I feel, and we all have come across this word, sustainable development. But one thing that clicked into my mind, that each sustainable development model of development is accessible to foreign masses, particularly tribal people. I don't think so. Even that's where it's placed like this.
I think I'll start with British TV. It is there. I think if you look at the traditional economy, it was always sustainable. What we need to look at is how we can make our life sustainable. Growth period. Yeah. Now the question comes how to make it. You cannot make your life sustainable or your model sustainable by telling the other side that whatever you have, that belongs to you. That's all about the contest. Contest comes from the fact that the two sides are not looking at the interdependence. Two sides are just saying it's mine or it's yours. There is one group which actually, that is the sustainable model. They have been living with that and all these things. I don't have a problem if they want to go whatever. But this is the model that the problem comes from our. We are the biggest consumers. We have become unsustainable. So much that our consumption actually exceeds production. That's why if you look at it, most of the urban food items and all this thing we have started importing. So in this case, what do you do? You cannot run a revolution going to each individual and asking them to change their habit. It can at best be you can create a disincentive for this consumption. How do you do that? You know, sometimes they give the example of Singapore. You know, the tax on a car is much more than the cost of the car. Then only I think when somebody is actually critically ill, you want to transport to the hospital, you take it. But it's a larger issue definitely. So my point to you that it is that side is okay. That side we are not much concerned. They are concerned with this side because we have started actually encroaching into their things. Our consumption has gone beyond. And just imagine the middle class is still poor. Now coming to your question. I agree with you that there is no doubt about that agricultural growth rate is coming down. India is going through a structural change in its economy. So the concerns are public investment in agriculture is coming down. That's the concern actually. And 2002 figure that I just want to correct it, it was a severe drought year also. But yes, we have this national objective of 4% growth in agriculture. With this growth rate in agriculture, the economy can grow at 8%. Remember, whatever you do, the monsoon is the finance minister in chief. If the agriculture doesn't grow at 4%, economy will not grow at 8%. Just check it out. Now the question comes. Yes, there is a concern, public investment needs to go. What is the argument? We need not to argue also. despite the falling share of agriculture in the GDP, which is around 16% now, dependence on agriculture is not coming down. The same number of people depend on agriculture. What does it mean? It means this is the most dependable source of income. And your most conflicts come from that part. With this kind of dependence and reliability of a source of livelihood, now you send few companies to take over that land, you have a conflict. That's where sustainability question also comes. Now, the second question was about the other side.
Monsanto and in Vidal.
I think there's a doubt about that. It's very much true that the farmers are coming in suicide. But there may be places where the suicide might have come down. But there is no credible link of Monsanto and other things actually leading to the drop in suicide. So we need more, I think, study to do that. Instead of just drawing a line. That.
So one of the sources that I got, the relationship, reportedly the project SHARE, I don't know if you've heard about it, it was run by Monsanto, it was recognized for its efforts in various places, and also won a recognition from one of the state legislators in USA.
That's why I told you, the credibility. Look at the credibility. Who supported it? What kind of study they did it? And just parting to conclude it, we need to be a bit careful with this kind of stuff because I remember the cherry blossom shoe policy. Suddenly saw a boom in Maharashtra in few districts. And the sales manager was also happy and came back and reported that my sale is going up like it. Then the general manager, the head of that company, I take up. But my data shows that this area is the most difficult as far as selling a shoe policy. It's still going, you are great. But he did one thing, he informally checked out. Then they found that actually many of these people are buying this large police, shoe police, to further blacken their goods and, so that they will get a better price out of it. So the Monsanto theory may be also like that. So we need to actually be careful. Thank you very much again for hearing.